Hey, it's been a long time, but no better time than the present to once again tee off with another Pittsburgh Golf Now Par 4. I'm Matt Gajtka along with Zac Weiss. Zach, last time I saw you, we were at Oakmont, but that feels like a long time ago when the major season is so jam-packed, and then you've got FedEx Cup, you've got end of the year stuff, and of course, it's a Ryder Cup year. So I don't know if I like it or I don't like how golf seems to just, I guess, overpopulate 3 or 4 months out of the year these days. When they first made the change to put the PGA Championship in May, I thought, okay, that makes sense. You've got a major golf event every month in the men's game, but to a certain extent, I don't know. It almost feels like it should be a little better distributed throughout the year. How do you feel? Because we're in September. At least we got the Ryder Cup to look forward to, but after that, it's nothing until the new year.
Well, for the haves, it gives you little chance to rest, and for the have-nots, it gives you right to be pissed off. Everybody's upset.
Yeah, I guess there's something to react to at any rate. For those of you who haven't watched one of these before, I don't blame you because we haven't done one since maybe January. It was early, I know, in 2025 calendar year. We had not played a major on the men's side yet, but we do have quite a bit to dig into. And I guess we'll start with what's on the doorstep. Zach, it's the Ryder Cup. It's at Bethpage Black, and it's coming up in just a couple of weeks. And the Americans announced their six captains picks, and the Europeans announced theirs as well over the span of several days. And big news from all of that was that Keegan Bradley is not going to be a playing captain. So I feel like it's an easy tap in for the first stroke here on the par four to discuss that. And for me, my initial reaction was I'm disappointed because we haven't had a playing captain in the Ryder Cup since Arnold Palmer in 1963. I enjoyed Tiger Woods' stint as a playing captain in the President's Cup in 2019. I think that added some spice to an event that sorely needed it. Not that the Ryder Cup needs any extra spice, but I was hoping for something a little more newsworthy out of that press conference. But hey, if Keegan says he can't do it, he doesn't feel like he can do it, wouldn't be good for the team. I'm not going to argue with him there, but I can't help but feel a little deflated. And I thought the press conference in general was a little bit anticlimactic in that way, even though Keegan did give a great insight into what he was thinking about and why he did end up choosing the six players that he did. So, what was your major takeaway from the U.S. press conference last week?
That Team Europe was pissed that Keegan did not pick himself. And yes, you make all of those comparables, and rightfully so. But this isn't the 1960s, right? I mean, the Ryder Cup is so much more involved. There's so many more appearances. Everything's under a microscope. How you're judged is big. I mean, let's not forget one of the biggest things that was the takeaway from Tom Watson's Ryder Cup captaincy was that he took Webb Simpson because Webb delivered an emotional and passionate plea, which is also something that was delivered by Matt Wallace on the European side and was also fallen upon quiet years. So there's no Tom Watson here. They've kind of learned from that mistake. I think the decision, in a way, was taken out of Keegan's hands from the way that he was describing it in the press conference. And yes, you could argue, yes, Tiger was a playing captain and it was active, but the President's Cup is almost completely a formality in every way. Just the way that the international team just can't quite compare to what the Americans are able to do on the golf course, albeit Ernie Els had that pretty darn close in the recent iteration. But the captain's picks, obviously, I think people were expecting that pick. And when you saw Cameron Young, the wheels started turning because, of course, there was the rumor that Sam Burns had already been contacted and that had leaked. But of course, you don't believe it until you see it. You have that Missouri approach. You have to show me and show us he did with that sixth pick. I mean, just going down the captain's picks, JT was a formality. We talked about how he had a really good start to the year. Morikawa was a formality, albeit it seems like he's been through more caddies than good finishes lately. But again, when his iron play is on, it's really hard to touch him. Ben Griffin, we've talked about the success story there. Cam Young coming on lately. Patrick Cantlay, say what you will about the guy, but he's born for the Ryder Cup. As slow of a pace as he is, as much as he complains about the pay for play, he's still important for the Ryder Cup and what he's able to do. And Sam Burns is probably the best putter in the planet right now. So, and the numbers back that up too. So very good picks. As for Europe, which we really didn't get a chance to talk about, was really all chalk, which was unfortunate. I would have given Harry Hall a pick, but these are values
Yeah.
that have been consistent in that European locker room. And quite frankly, you didn't expect a six other than this to be the picks. I mean, Shane Lowry, we'll find out if he bleeping hates this place or not. We'll find that out in due time. I don't know if his form is necessarily the best. You have another live guy in Rahm, which is nice to see. It's a shame that given how the season went, that Neiman wasn't deserving, but Neiman didn't really deserve it based on his major merit. So that was disappointing. Sepp's early start, good start. Maybe a little bit not the best late, but still, I mean, his form rewarded, played the past Ryder Cup. Hovland, the same thing. He found a way to win when his form wasn't the best. The fact Ludwig Oberg was the fifth captain's pick, and when he was probably one of the closest things to a lock when we last had a par four, says a lot. And Fitzpatrick with the form recently in the previous Ryder Cup. I mean, these were the six chalk picks. Could you have picked a Penga? Sure. Could you have went Hoy, and in this case, Myron Cope, double Hoy? You could have went with double Hoy guard, and they were probably close to it, but just so many guys were in form that it made for a tough decision for the Americans. Obviously, Keegan the left out. You look at everything in regards to others. Yeah, of course. I mean, Goderup could have deserved some consideration, but didn't play well enough down the stretch. There were other names too down the list, guys that won events that just were either not the most healthy or just didn't have it. They don't necessarily have the experience. Perhaps Griffin took a spot from one of those guys, but Griffin probably the most consistent out of any of those six names on the American side this season. And good on Keegan for rewarding that. Keegan played with them, so he had a chance to kind of see it up close as well. So really, I think the captains did a good job, but it's just like any sport, right? So many people love to grade the trade right away. So many people love to grade the draft pick. You don't really know how good of a pick it is until you see how it shines on the light. So quite frankly, everything's an incomplete right now. Obviously, the Americans feel they have an edge. Obviously, Europe feels that they might have more informed guys overall right now. But it'll be interesting to see. I mean, there feels like there is some buzz, there is some excitement across this Ryder Cup that maybe hasn't been felt in the last couple iterations to a degree where both teams truly feel they have a chance. The Americans didn't go with their best buddies like they did with Zach Johnson, and Europe again went with that experience. I mean, one of those six spots was probably going to end up going to Justin Rose had he not popped off during the playoffs. So, regardless, experience was the name of the game. Luke Donald has done this before. You could say Keegan Bradley was in a lose-lose position where obviously his miss being televised on full swing like it was possibly backdoored his way into this captaincy in addition to the, of course, geographical regional knowledge of Bethpage being a kind of localish guy to a degree, St. John's, of course. So there's a lot to take from these picks. I think they revealed a lot about what you can expect from both of these captains and the decisions they make, and the fact that they were both resolute in their decisions and they both explained their cases very well. So respect to both of them, and we'll see how it shows up.
With the possible playing captaincy situation off the board with Bradley going the conventional route, I'm left wondering what's your headline going into this event? Because I think Bethpage Black is its own character. We've seen a couple of majors there. We all remember back in 2002, the U.S. Open, the People's Open. It was a great time. It was a cool concept as well. For the USGA, I kind of feel like they're going away from the public stuff. They're going more with the exclusive old school private courses. Of course, Oakmont being one of them when it comes to the U.S. Open. So I'm glad to see Bethpage get another spotlight here after a couple of U.S. Opens and the PGA Championship, of course, that Brooks Koepka won in 2019. A lot of hype, Zach, about New York fans. I'm not sure that the price scale for tickets is going to allow for the rank and file New Yorkers to get in there, and I think some of that is a little bit overhyped too. Hazeltine was pretty hostile to the Europeans, and that was in the middle of the Midwest. I'm not sure if it's a regional thing at all. I just think the Ryder Cup gets American golf fans riled up like it gets European golf fans going. And remember the last time that the U.S. hosted the Ryder Cup in 2021 at Whistling Straits, there was quite a bit of travel restriction on folks from Europe, folks from overseas due to the COVID aftermath. So we didn't see that many European fans make the trip over. This time we will see, I would imagine, a good amount more. For me, Zach, the headline might be, is Europe the favorite on the road? We've played 8 consecutive Ryder Cups with just one road team winning, and that took the miracle at Medina to pull off. So you could say that shouldn't have even happened. Really, you have to go back to 2006 to find a situation where the road team, Europe, prevailed on foreign soil, and it was a convincing victory. So for me, I'm wondering if we need a road team to come through, a visiting team to come through to make this a little more interesting. Otherwise, it's been all about the home cooking since the middle of the 2000s. So that's my headline is I think Europe could be a slight betting favorite. And I also think that the Ryder Cup needs some of that juice that would come from a visiting team prevailing. Of course, Rory said that's one of his lifetime goals. That's on his golf bucket list. So I'm sure he'll be motivated too. What are your feelings on this Ryder Cup and what headline you would write as we get ready for it 3 weeks away?
I think both teams are going to look at themselves as the underdog, Europe, because that's
Hmm.
how they feel. And obviously, Keegan made the comment on Full Swing that he did, which was very bulletin board material, kind of telling the guys we're going to win this thing, full well knowing that there was a chance that that clip was going to get picked up. And obviously, I think Europe has more informed golfers. I mean, even a guy who made it, DeChambeau, not necessarily really displaying the form. Henley showed some form in the final week, but not enough. English, not really. Shoffley's been injured all year. Spawn lost in the playoff and Scheffler, but what is that? 2 out of 6? I think the Pirates would take that batting average, but by and large, you really didn't get a chance to see that. McIlroy obviously goes without saying. Bobby Mack and Tommy Fleetwood and Justin Rose, guys that all just won or were in contention close by for FedEx Cup wins. Rasmus Højgaard, a guy that won the DP World Tour. You need guys like that. Tyrrell Hatton, a guy that's competed in the majors that really had an opportunity with Liv. Obviously, you had a chance to see him play very recently as well. So these are guys that are in form. So what you're seeing right now is, I think, just an overall feeling with Europe that you have the locker room edge just generally and organically because that's just been so ingrained throughout the years. But you also have the form on it. So if there was a chance for a road victory, this would be it. And that's why there's an amount of excitement because there's a chance when so many of these home roads are such blowouts that this could literally come down to the last Sunday singles match because it's just that close. There will be that much energy. There will be that much passion. Whether Patrick Cantlay gets his $1 million or not, what's going to happen is that this is going to be very, very spirited. And you're going to have Luke Donald finally feeling like he has something to prove. He did it last time, but can he do it on the road? Keegan Bradley wanting to back up his decision. I think the captain's decisions are going to be under more of a microscope than maybe they have since Tom Watson not making the pods and making the Webb Simpson pick. You could say that they analyzed the heck out of Zach Johnson last time, but Zach Johnson's biggest mistake was picking his buddies and they just weren't in form and didn't have juice. It was one big mistake that was analyzed and still analyzed, but really, if his mistake was picking his best buddies when they just weren't in good form on the road anyways, I don't necessarily see as much harm on it in revisionist history. But this will be close. This will be exciting. This is the Ryder Cup you want to see in every way imaginable.
I hope it's close. And Rome was relatively close. I think the Ryder Cup always feels close on Sunday because you can talk yourself into so many permutations, especially when so many of the matches are early out on the course. If you're an American fan or if you were an American fan for Rome, there was a glimmer of hope there about midway through, but there's always that moment. And I guess that's the genius of the Ryder Cup and backloading all those points on Sunday. You play for half the points on Sunday, even though so much attention goes on the foursomes and the four balls. In the end, Sunday singles very often decides matters, even though it doesn't quite feel like it, I suppose, with how the matches are spread out over 3 days. All right, let's look at the season overall. And Zach, as we were discussing potential topics for this show, you brought up something that I thought was pretty interesting. You have your so-called individual champions on both of the men's professional, like the two tours who are rivals, the PGA Tour and the Live Tour. You had Tommy Fleetwood winning the Tour Championship and thus the FedEx Cup under the new old format of just straight up 72 holes for the entire thing, for all the bonus money and the season long championship, coming down to just 4 days at East Lake in Atlanta. And Tommy Fleetwood ends up being, well, he was the hottest golfer down the stretch, even though he wasn't the hottest golfer throughout the year. That mantle, of course, belonged to Scotty Scheffler. But a great story in Fleetwood. He breaks through. If I had any cojones whatsoever, I could have put some money on Tommy because he was trending, and I thought maybe this will be the week for him, even though it seems like the deck would be stacked against him to come through with the best of the best there. But so Fleetwood pulls it off. John Rahm wins the individual title, the Order of Merit, whatever you want to call it, on Live despite not winning a single tournament. He was in the top 10 for each and every tournament. But Joaquin Niemann, who you brought up earlier, won 5 times on Live and somehow was edged out by Rahm. Just Rahm's consistency outdoing Niemann's hot and cold play over the course of the year. So is it a fool's errand, Zach? I think it is. I asked the question rhetorically, but I'm not sure what we're accomplishing through these season-long points races. And with well, Liv's got its own thing going on because it has the team championship, which Rahm's Legion 13 did win. I had the coverage there from here in Michigan, and so that's an interesting sidebar there. And that's what Liv is supposedly more about is the team golf. But when it comes to individual season-long stuff, I'm just not sure it pays off the build-up because it's a sport in which the 4 most important tournaments don't belong to either tour. So it's just golf's in an interesting spot when it comes to that sort of thing. I guess I can't blame the tours for trying to have some sort of a culmination or a playoff or whatever you want to call it. But in the end, I feel you're going to have some of these, nonsensical is not the right word because both Fleetwood and Rahm are quality golfers, but results that don't quite add up and don't feel like they sum up what we saw over the course of 6, 7, 8 months of play.
Well, no, I mean, starting with the PGA Tour, first of all, to the people that put on social media about Tommy Fleetwood's win not being legitimate. So you're saying that the Tiger Woods win on the same tournament in 2018 was also not legitimate? You
Yeah.
had no problem with that. So try again with that. The fact that it took this long to change the Tour Championship format and it still doesn't feel like it's right really says a lot about just how stuck it feels at the PGA Tours right now. Personally, my opinion, since everybody asked, is going to be Thursday and Friday, you narrow it down from 30 guys to 8. Then you go to classic Matt Gajtka match play for eight, and you narrow it down to 4 into Sunday, and then you have your semi and you have your finals. And that's when you get your money and that's when you get your excitement. You don't, I know the TV, I understand you might not get the biggest name, but if you want in form without any starting strokes, that's a really, really good compromise, in my personal opinion. I think Fleetwood winning does represent the tour. Yes, it was McIlroy's for the first few months because Scotty Scheffler decided to cook, and then Scotty Scheffler decided to cook on the golf course after that. So that really helps as well. But I do feel that Fleetwood's chase is something that was inspiring. So many times during these playoffs, you hear the Patty Ice chants, you hear the Bryson chants, you hear the McIlroy chants. You don't really get to hear a Tommy Fleetwood chant because Tommy Fleetwood, in a sense, has still been an underdog because, at least in America, he had not been able to get the job done, save for Ryder Cups. So what really got seen was that he was able to overcome his own demons, but he had to get that scar tissue out of the way in order to do that. So I'm not as miffed about Fleetwood winning because I feel that it's a very good feel-good story that anybody, writer, fan, contemporary, and everybody in between really can get behind, and it puts the tour in a really, really good light because he had the opportunities. I still think that there needs to be a better way for there to be more opposite field events or some way just to get some of these guys more opportunities to get tour cards versus maybe get stuck in that middle. And now you've added an additional event at the Trump Doral, which only makes it one less event that these have-nots have to secure this card. And by have-nots, I of course mean those that don't qualify for those elevated signature events. On Live, yes, Rahm's consistency, which was something we all talked about at Oakmont, was to be admired. But you want the guy that's won the most, and that's Niemann. I don't care if he's hot or cold. I mean, so is Sergio, to the point that he's so miffed about not making a Ryder Cup team he had no business being, and that he's not playing this week. Woe is he. But regardless of that, it just shows to the fact that neither side really has it right in what it takes to determine a champion. And like you said, it feels farcical to begin with. And it's why the PGA Tour really markets that Players' Championship as its 5th major, because they have to have some sense of entitlement. But it's hard to have a sense of entitlement when it's buried with a lot of signature events and majors. Yes, maybe it's the most complete field in golf because qualifying doesn't eliminate your absolute favorite player. So, yeah, there is something to be said about how truly open that is. But you could also argue the US Open's just as open because of how it qualifies, and everybody has an equal level playing field chance if they're not exempt. So it's kind of apples and oranges. It's kind of what you want and what you like. But really, what's going on is Liv's real only punishment is, hey, don't get relegated. Which Ian Poulter was under the wire. Obviously, a guy like Henrik Stenson being relegated, not what you want for the tour. But now they finally decided they don't want to play favorites after it happened to Bubba Watson last year. So, I mean, it's just a matter of what everybody wants, and it's challenging because Live, I think everybody has a pretty united front right now. There isn't really much egos in terms of making those decisions because everybody that has a chance to play can play. It's the PGA Tour where there's becoming more of a divide and there's less people being represented that don't have the equal share and the equal opportunity. Again, represented by the Trump Doral announcement being an elevated event, which was just a course that was used on Live. I understand that obviously it respects the president and his impact on the game of golf. It makes him happy as well now. But the president has events on both tours at his courses, which is really ideal for that situation. But politics aside, you have two tours that are kind of stuck and they kind of need each other and they're at such an impasse. And now that the PGA Tour is making its leadership transition, it just seems like we're right back where we started from. Two sides that are very bullish in what it believes in, but further along than closer along. And that's frustrating for the game of golf. And it's frustrating for the fans who are trying to consume it.
Yeah, if I were in charge of the PGA Tour, if I were Brian Rolapp, the new CEO, I guess we can finish on this topic. Nothing would be sacred. Now, I'm not saying you would, I guess, move every tournament to a different spot on the schedule. I'm not saying you necessarily go away from some longer tenured tournaments at markets and courses that work out. But for me, I would just open up a whole bunch of stuff to debate. And the number one change I would make is to either make it a real FedEx Cup playoffs or don't call it the playoffs at all. Just have the Tour Championship at the end of the year, make it the top whoever, however many you want. And I'm open to match play. I'm open to half match play, half stroke play. They were talking about potentially doing stroke play matches where you would still play 18 holes, but the lowest score would win, obviously, at the end of the day, and you would advance based on that. I thought that was interesting, but they ended up going with the old boring formula here this year. However, I am optimistic about the PGA Tour and Rolapp's background, especially with the NFL, as he made the point in his opening press conference. At the NFL, they were not afraid to change things, and maybe not all those changes were the most popular things in the world, but I think they always had the growth of the game and the product at the forefront of their mind, and I don't think you can necessarily say that about the PGA Tour over the last 30, 40, maybe even 50 years. I think they get stuck in their ways, and that's part of the reason why you have this breakaway tour like Live trying to disrupt, and it's part of the reason why we have the best players in the world only facing off against each other 4 times out of the year. And that's bottom line. That's what's not good for the golf fan. And I know Rolapp's got his hands full, but certainly I'd make a priority some sort of peace in our time between the PGA Tour and Live, some situation where we can get at least a couple more events, even if there are crossovers and the two tours remain separate. I still think there's opportunities to get the best of the best out there in a scenario that's not one of the four majors, something new, something fresh. I think that is or should be on the table if it isn't already. What do you think about Rolapp's priorities here as he goes to work and Jay Monahan fades off into the distance?
I mean, I feel that Rolapp is going to be so much more organized than Monahan. I still remember you and I were right next to each other in that Oakmont press area, and I broke the news to you about the Rolapp kind of transition in power, and we both at first seemed a little puzzled, but then we realized with the NFL background, it makes so much sense. In terms of Live, I think it's kind of what it is, at least until he organizes and figures out what he wants. He's breaking off into committees. He's very much about the details. He's willing to try some things and see if they work or not. But the closest anybody in Live has gotten to being on tour is former Oakmont U.S. Amateur champ James Piot kind of going along at it with the PGA Tour Americas and going through it that way. And, you know, a guy like Eugenio Chacarra, who was in Live and's kind of going back to the DP World Tour and kind of figuring things out. But really, I mean, a lot of these Live guys just aren't in the form that usually were when they left the tour. Patrick Reed was an exception this year, but Koepka outside of that first round at Oakmont really dropped off. Dustin Johnson was an absolute shell of himself. It's at the point that Pat Perez isn't even golfing anymore. So you just go on down the line and you can say whatever you want, but there's so much of a divide, and it feels like it's such an easy answer, but because of the other extraneous factors that kind of are looked at it, it just doesn't seem like it's going to happen. So, at least for now, Rolapp has to focus on what is in front of him. And what's in front of him is the PGA Tour, and how can he make it better? And it feels like there's already been a misstep because they announced another signature event, and all of these guys that are not a part of the top 70 that either have conditional or alternate status just don't have those opportunities. And it's almost, you have a couple of chances to get into that swing, that three or five that get an opportunity to get in. Otherwise, you're screwed. Might as well just not pack your bags whatsoever. And it's really deflating to know that your margins are smaller. Yes, the Corn Ferry, you have some of those opportunities. Maybe you're in a little bit of a higher exemption bracket for where you stand in terms of the pecking order when it comes to a field list, but you almost have to perform at every single one or you're not doing anything. Why do you think Ben Griffin did all of these events just to get to this point? Without that list, he doesn't make the Ryder Cup. We don't know about his story still. So you almost have to run the table like he does in this current form just because there aren't the opportunities. We saw Ryan Fox do the same thing, but without either of those playoff wins, we don't see him at the PGA Championship. We don't see him at Oakmont. So the divide and the opportunity to perform is just so much harder, and these guys feel that pressure. Otherwise, they're stuck in either DP World Tour land or Corn Ferry land, or they have to make a really, really hard decision, just like Ben Griffin did years ago when he had to go into the financial industry. So these are real decisions. There is real consequence now because golf is so divided that the haves and the have-nots are just so distinguished that it makes it harder. And these guys that are being appointed to these committees are the haves. You have maybe one voice that's a have-not, and they continuously get drowned out. It's what led Grayson Murray to be so frustrated years ago. And it's what's leading more and more of these guys to realize and try to champion the same fight. So it's challenging. Rolapp, I do not envy the job that Brian Rolapp has to do, but somebody has to do the job, and I'm sure as heck glad that it's not Jay Monahan.
Yeah, I think we can agree that new leadership was sorely needed, and just Monahan's time had passed. He essentially was Tim Finchem 2.0, and we're in an era now where golf's got to fight for viewership. It's got to fight for its product, and it's got to continue to try to innovate here. And I'm not saying it's easy, as you mentioned, Zach. The central tension there is between, is the PGA Tour a true meritocracy, or is it a showcase of the top talent? It's a little of both. It's trying to be a little bit of both, and I think it almost has to try to find a way to appease both sides of that. And also, that tension is what led to Liv splitting off, because you had so many of those marquee names feeling like that there should be smaller fields. There should be more of a guarantee to be there for every day of the tournament, and to allow fans to know that you're going to see Phil Mickelson or you're going to see Bryson DeChambeau each and every day when you buy those tickets. I do sympathize with that side of it, and but I also really appreciate the stories like a Ben Griffin. Everyone on the PGA Tour who has risen to signature event status got there the hard way by earning it on the golf course. So you have to maintain some of that somehow, and that's been a stumbling block for Liv when it comes to trying to get world rankings points, is that it didn't really have that many points of entry, and it didn't have until this year, apparently, real honest to God relegation. So yeah, both tours are grappling with it. PGA Tour on more of a grander scale because they've been at it for longer, but this is the central push and pull in individual sports. It's how many stars can you create? Can you keep those stars relevant? Can you keep those stars happy so they don't split off to go off to some other venture? So there's a lot going on there. It makes it really interesting to follow. And whether you're talking about on the actual golf course, like we're going to see in the Ryder Cup later this month, or the continued developments as we're going to go into year 5 of this schism in the men's pro game coming up in 2026. Hard to believe, but yeah, we've been in this situation, kind of a limbo-like situation, for quite some time, and it doesn't look like there's any end in sight. Zach, thank you so much for your time on the par 4. Running out of time here, so I just want to thank you for your contributions to Pittsburgh Golf Now. Looks like you're going to be headed out to another Corn Ferry event, the one you have attended in recent years in Columbus, Ohio. and our very own from Pittsburgh, Neil Shipley, is going to be somewhat on the PGA Tour next year. He's going to have some partial status because of how well he's done on Corn Ferry. So I'm sure you're looking forward to getting out there to the PGA Tour's minor league circuit.
Well, absolutely. And very, very quickly, a quick sidebar. I saw a story in The Athletic about catfishing fans with the LPGA Tour, where LPGA
I saw that
golfers have
too.
been posed as actual golfers. And just extremely with the age of AI, this is golf, this is non-golf. Just be careful, be safe, be smart. If there's not a blue check mark and it's not verifiable, do not exchange any money. It's a shame that it's come to that. On a positive note, looking forward to Columbus, looking forward to seeing Neil, looking forward to walking the course. Love being in Columbus.
Yeah, and we look forward to that coverage on Pittsburgh Golf Now. And who knows, we could have a column or two for myself and Zach as the Ryder Cup gets set to get going. Fall golf is awesome, and especially when you've got that trophy on the line. So we'll talk to you next time on the PGN Par 4. See you then.